Our next guest created his first company when he was just 20 years old. Radoslav Georgiev is the co-founder and the CTO of the Bulgarian OKR management software, Gtmhub. OKR stands for Objective and Key Results Methodology for goal setting in business. Together with his co-founders, Rado is part of the so-called Telerik mafia, a term coined for the entrepreneurs who came out of one of the most successful Bulgarian IT companies ever. Rado started his journey there as a programmer and grew up to run 10 teams of software engineers. A few months ago, Gtmhub raised a record of $120 million Series C funding round, which is an impressive for the region as a whole, the largest one in the whole OKR space. Many see Gtmhub as a unicorn company in the near future. Radoslav Georgiev, welcome to the Recursive podcast.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
I wanted to start the conversation a bit going back in time. I read that you were born in Haskovo, and I was wondering, what were your ambitions back then?
Well,
Haskovo is not a big city, so
it's a little bit hard to to talk about ambitions at that stage. I remember that I was impressed by technology. The first time I saw a working computer. Of course, the first touch with most of the 90s kids with the computer is a computer game. So, and then I joined the local youth club, computer science club. But I remember that I've always been a thinker and wanted to like disassemble things and reassemble them back. So I like building stuff.
Okay, that's really cool. What led you then to the American University, which is not a university that was famous for technical education? Why did you choose this one?
That's a funny story. I actually wanted to go to do my higher education in the United States, and applied to a lot of American universities. Got accepted in a few, but I could not afford to go there. So I always had the American University in Bulgaria as a fallback plan, and it turned out to be the plan that was executed.
I guess it was, in a way, the environment there that, I don't know, maybe started you thinking about business and entrepreneurship, or am I wrong? Because we see a lot of entrepreneurs actually coming from that university.
Yeah, I went there and started immediately in the computer science department. I wanted to graduate computer science. But as the first couple of years progressed, I saw that I still had some free time that I can utilize, and I decided to pursue a second major there. So I enrolled in the business department as well. But honestly, I've never been thinking about going into entrepreneurship at that stage of my life. I've seen a lot of my colleagues from the university that were pursuing specific entrepreneurship courses, but those were not things that interested me at the moment. Yeah, I wanted to pursue a career in software development, in software engineering, and at that time my goal was to become a software architect, whatever that means.
Okay.
Yeah.
At what point did you join Telerik?
I think it was 2 weeks after I got my diploma from the American University. So I've had already started the process of applying there. They do like a spring and a winter job fair. So I went to the job fair, just wrote a very quick CV and started giving it out to the companies that were there. And it was, at that time, Telerik was the only company that was actually hiring. Because it was 2009, the 2008 economic crisis had already hit Bulgaria, and most of the companies that were on the market in terms of employers were not actively seeking to expand their teams. So they were just there for the presence and for the employer branding, but everywhere they were saying that we don't have open positions actually, but you can leave us your CV. And the only company that was actually interested in hiring people was Telerik.
And they called you back.
Yeah, and they called me back. I went to a couple of rounds of interviews. I couldn't land the job that I was applying for. I started in another position, but things actually it turns out it was the place to start.
There's been a lot already said about Telerik. We've been analyzing the culture there. We've been talking to a couple of founders who then later on started their own company after the success and the exit of Telerik. Maybe it doesn't really make sense to go deep into that, but what struck me was recently this report by Endeavor Bulgaria, the Insight report, and they had this amazing map of the Bulgarian ecosystem, and in the center is Telerik. And from Telerik, you can see the relations to many other companies where they were actually founded by former employees of Telerik. And Gtmhub is one of them, right? Yeah. You and your co-founders, you started this bond already back then working together in Telerik. What was so special about this bond that gave you then the driver to go on your own?
Yep. So Ivan and Dancho and we started in the same team. Ivan had already joined in 2008. I joined in 2009, and Dancho joined us in 2010. At that time, the team was pretty small. It was the smallest division of Telerik. And being a very small team, we had to make do with whatever we had. So it really helped us to grow ourselves into good professionals and being able to scale both our resources in a proper way so that we can reach our goals.
And this was also the time when you learned about OKR, I guess. I mean, it was a methodology that kind of, became popular through Google.
I learned about OKRs very close to the end of my path in Telerik. It was after we were acquired by Progress Software. Okay. So at one point in time, I think it was 2012, 2013, the HR department introduced us to the yet another management framework. Before that, we have V2MAM, and before that, we had something else. And at one point, all of the function leads were gathered into a large meeting room, and we were given a presentation saying, okay, so from now on, we're doing OKRs. These are OKRs. Make sure that you communicate this to your teams. And you have 1 quarter to set up your next objectives.
Okay, that's actually ambitious, 1 quarter.
Yeah.
Back then, I mean, Progress at this point was how big? Like already 700-800?
Yes.
Probably?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we tried with a smaller part of Telerik, but I think the execution was rushed and it was not well thought out in terms of communication. And when you're adopting any new management methodology or whatever that changes your processes and practices, it's a change management process, basically. So you're bound to have a lot of misunderstanding of why you're doing this. People will start resisting it eventually because they do not fully understand the benefits of it, and if they don't subscribe to this, this project is bound to fail. So eventually, the first time I got to meet with OKRs, this project failed.
Okay, but you still gave it obviously a second go. So I guess you were in a way the position to be an ambassador for this management shift, also to educate others of how to implement it.
We tried our best to educate our teams, but we were not good equipped at that time. With also those things come with practice. But Jordan, Dancho, Ivan, and I saw the benefit of it, and all the the things that we're talking about now, the transparency, the alignment, the pushing down of decision making, further down the reporting chain so that you empower your teams to make business critical decisions on their own and to follow through with them and execute them. We saw this as a huge potential.
Okay.
So,
and when did the idea for building a software around it was born?
I think it was about early in 2016. We already had started with Gtmhub. And at that time, we were doing a business analytics platform, mainly focused around sales teams.
Okay.
And the feedback that we were getting, both from potential investors and potential customers, and basically anyone in our networks that we could use to validate the ideas, is that, well, it's just another reporting tool. How is it different than the awesome analytics that Salesforce, for example, does? Or any built-in analytics in any CRM suite? How are you making it better? And we're talking a lot about the future, like building all the awesome capabilities that now we can actually afford to build. But at that time, this did not stick very well because when people were looking at the dashboards, they were not seeing any actionability. So it's just another number. What do I do with this? And this is where the idea about OKRs came. So we were thinking, okay, we know the benefits of OKRs, but we also know that humans are the weak link in OKR execution. Most of the times we are making decisions without good context in terms of data and information. So we're not making decisions based on information. So they're mostly on a gut feeling. And not always the gut feeling is the right one. So this is where this idea came, crystallized itself. We have the data. We already built a very advanced data analytics and data ingestion system. And just tying it together with OKRs made perfect sense to us at that time.
We speak a lot about, building businesses that are data-driven, organizations that are data-driven, and still in its core, I think entrepreneurship is also a lot about instincts and the gut feeling. I wonder, how does it correspond with, looking at targets, setting goals, and then, measuring your progress towards them? Isn't it somehow, taking away the intuition that one needs to run a business and to be a manager, or?
Well, I don't think so. I think that it's actually helping you validate your intuition. So you would always have some vague idea of a problem, and you would say, okay, my intuition tells me that this is happening because such and such, and this is what we can do to improve it. But if you don't back this with data, it's just opinions. So this is where our platform came into play to actually either disprove your hypothesis or validate it and give you the means on executing on
it. So you are an OKR software company. And I guess you also implemented OKRs as a methodology in Gtmhub.
Yes.
And in a way, you should be the paragon of how to do that. I wonder, can you share maybe some practical tips? Because I think on paper, it makes perfect sense. Part of implementing OKR is definitely a mindset when it comes to management. We can't, put that out of the equation. And still, when you're doing your product and you're developing the platform that you today is, becoming more and more successful and widely used by international companies, what are the nits and bolts that you can give like a like an advice to others?
Well, the first thing, as I said in the beginning, it's a change management process.
Okay.
For a lot of people, for a lot of organizations, this is a completely new thing. Even at our company, yes, initially, the co-founders, we knew what OKRs are, and we had some experience with it. And we've seen a failed implementation of OKRs and knew what to avoid when we're doing our own OKR implementation within the company. But then you start onboarding new people that are yet to have contact with this. And you have to manage this process. You have to constantly make sure that people know what this is about, they understand this, and they also subscribe to this idea, because if they do not fall behind this, it's not going to succeed. So a second practical tip would be to have what we call internally OKR champions. So these can be anyone in the team that gets trained into managing the process and also making sure that the process is adapted to the needs of the company. Because no two companies are alike, and we cannot have the same mode for implementing OKRs across every company. We need to make sure that this process is molded towards the needs of the company. And those people are the ones that are pushing this through. And they're also always keeping us honest about our OKR plans, and are we following through with them? Are we leaving stuff behind? Are we forgetting about this? Because in a lot of the cases, when you start implementing anything new, so there's always this euphoria about the new thing, the novelty, and everyone is super excited about the new thing. Yes, we're going to conquer the world with this. This is going to help us. And they start doing this, and then sometime like 5-6 weeks down the road, people get into the daily stuff, and which is normal. And they get bogged down into the daily grind, and they start forgetting about this. So it's very important to have the OKR champions that are facilitating this process within an organization. And we can see now that a lot of our customers are making this an official role within their organizations.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting. What is actually the job of an OKR champion, or what kind of qualities one needs to have to be an OKR champion, by the way? I wonder.
I would say that they need to be a very good communicator, most of all, and also to have a lot of empathy for their colleagues, and to find the reasons why the company is struggling with the implementation. It's not the idea of OKRs is to go away from the classical factory management approach. Like you have one shift leader, and he is always or she is always telling like, this is the quota, we need to produce X number of widgets, whatever. So it's a completely different paradigm. So this requires a lot of talking with your colleagues, teaching them, and also showing them the best practices and adapting the process as it goes along, because it's an evolving thing. The way we do OKRs now in Gtmhub is very different than the way we started doing it, and this has a lot of reasons for it. For example, we grew the company, so we're no longer a small team of 10 people in the same room. We are now about 320 people spread all around the world. So it's a completely different situation. What worked in one situation in the first setting does not apply anymore. So you need to constantly evolve how this is done.
I guess OKRs are quite, or people in the tech sector, in the software industry, are very or more familiar with OKRs, but the concept would be probably new for a lot of production companies, because this is what you mentioned. I was wondering, how does it relate, for instance, to what we know as the process manager, from the past? I guess you still have them in big factories and also in the production industry. And
Well, the most important thing is that in the current setting of the knowledge economy, we need to switch from output management, or basically counting how many things we produce, to actually go to outcomes management, to be focused on the outcomes we want to achieve and the results that we want to get, rather than the effort that we're going to put in.
This is interesting. What is the difference between outcomes and outputs?
So, in a very simplistic way, the output is, and I can give a easy example with the software engineering role. So, an example for output management would be me as a software engineer is how many items I implement, how many lines of code I do, how many bugs I fix. That's the output management. In the outcome management approach, I would sit down with my manager, for example, and probably involve a couple of my teammates from the product team that are also we are also collaborating with on building the software. And then we would have a discussion of what do we want to achieve with this? Where do we want to get our product to, for example? So this can mean that we want to increase the usage of the product, or we want to increase the NPS score. So to have a, and then once you start framing the problem in such a way, you start thinking not on the items that you cause, but you're thinking if anything that you're doing is going to have an impact on the goal that you want to reach.
Thank you for mentioning exactly this keyword. I was thinking about the same, impact is often something very abstract. It's a construct that is not directly measurable. I mean, we can probably measure, the numbers of items that you have produced or developed or coded, but having an impact is a totally different thing. Do you see that perspective being adopted by the companies who are working with you? Thinking a bit more how to translate the idea of the impact that I want to have, probably even a vision that I have for the company, translating it then into directly measurable variables.
Well, that's initially it's very hard to put yourself into this mindset, again, because we've been taught so far on how to do the output-driven management. So I have X amount of tasks to complete, and this is how I'm getting evaluated on, for example, if I'm like an individual contributor. And what we see that works very well is when we start asking the question, so what? So what is going to change if you implement X, Y, Z? What will be the difference? What will happen if you don't do it? For example, if you decide to do something completely else, different.
And when they don't have a good answer to that, what do you do?
This means that we need to further refine the objective and work on the measurement, on how we're going to achieve it.
I have encountered this many times in life. I remember, for instance, back then at university, everyone would ask, well, how many words should be the master thesis? And you're like, okay, well, or even today in the newsroom, how many articles should we produce per week?
Yep.
How many users should we have on the platform that we're developing? Are these still valid measurements?
Some of them are, but I would argue that most of them are just vanity metrics. They are numbers that just make us feel good that we're doing something. So, for example, I'm getting X visitors on my blog post, but so what? I mean, how does this translate to, for example, our marketing team getting more leads to the sales team? And if I want to get more people to use the product, but again, so what? In our case, we measure our success in actually how successful are our customers. So if we see a positive change in the strategy execution of our customers, this means that we're successful. And that's how we're measuring it.
That's an ambitious goal, but I guess this is also measurable over a long period of time. I mean, how old is now Gtmhub?
Well, Gtmhub is started on 1st of June in 2015, so we're going almost 7 years. Yeah,
it's actually a really nice date.
It was intentionally so.
And in the short time, do you already observe this positive, outcomes on the strategy of your customers?
Yes, we can see this, and this is validated by our customers saying them, because we're very close cooperation with them, and we hold quarterly reviews with them on how their strategy execution is going. And this can be even validated by the case studies and white paper that we're publishing and all the webinars we have with our customers.
Now I'm going to turn into a bit other direction, again in the context of OKR. I can only guess, but maybe this is your observation, that there might be resistance of adopting OKRs because we're often afraid of measuring our success. If we start to measure it, then we might at some point realize that we're not on the right path. Maybe we're even failing. How can a manager and a leader deal with that internally?
There's a lot of failure points that can happen. So, and they do depend on the type of organization. So, for example, for more mature organization, there's a very big fear of the transparency that OKRs bring into the table, because once you have everyone's objectives and execution of those objectives and the progress tracking on those objectives visible to the whole organization, people get scared. Well, what if I don't make progress on my objective? And everybody is going to see that I'm not making progress on that objective. And that's a very, very valid concern. And this probably, I'm not a psychologist, but comes down to the fact that we, in most of our lives, are incentivized to succeed, and not only to succeed, and frown upon failure.
Yes.
For example. Yeah, so that's one thing, and the other one is, of course, the transparency thing, and then also the fear of failure. This is actually what OKRs are about, to overcome this fear of failure, and actually to use, if, for example, you do not succeed, to use this as a learning experience, so that you can know how not to proceed in the future and to draw some conclusions. So there is a constant process of improvement. And yes, of course, in the beginning, it is quite expected that the first couple of OKR cycles will be rough. You will see failure here and there, but it is important to again, have a very honest conversation with your team and say, okay, so this means probably we did not focus on the right stuff. This means that we did not put our strengths into the right direction. What can we learn about this? So how about the next cycle? Can we do better?
I love this. So embracing OKRs is related to also embracing failure in a way, or learning from failure, embracing the possibility of making mistakes. Okay.
And you can see that when you're setting objectives in OKRs, the important thing is not to set ambitious goals. So there's this common saying in the OKR world that it's 70% attainment on the progress is very well attained progress. I mean, if you set an objective that you're going to complete in 100%, means that you're either sandbagging or you're not pushing yourselves towards a bigger outcome. And also, this helps you tackle the big challenges. So it's one thing that we say, I want our product to scale to X amount concurrent users. And what if I say I wanted to scale to 10 times that amount? I will be solving for different problems. And this is again the mindset that we're putting ourselves into. So it's one thing to solve for a 10 times smaller problem. It's another thing to start thinking about how to solve for a way bigger problem.
I have now also another tricky question. What do you think about aligning OKR results to remuneration?
That's a big mistake. Yeah, we've seen this a lot of times, and every time this happens, a couple of things start to be observed. So first, people start actually sandbagging the objectives and not pushing themselves, but actually choosing easy objectives, easy pickings.
Okay.
So this immediately translates to actually not moving the needle for the company, because people are doing stuff that know that they would achieve, and probably doing the stuff that you know you can do does not necessarily mean that this is the right stuff to do. And people start also gaming the system, like they're again start thinking about vanity metrics and things that can be easily managed and easily influenced, but those things do not, most of the times, are not the metrics and the effort that you need to put in order to succeed.
Let's move back a bit more maybe to the business development of Gtmhub. You recently moved the headquarters to Denver, right?
Yep.
Yes. Tell us a bit more of how do you approach the US market? I've been hearing around that you obviously did a lot of right there, yeah? And you had a very successful strategy. What can we learn from you?
In hindsight, it might look like a successful strategy. At certain points during the execution of this strategy, it did not feel so successful. But the important thing for us was always to be open-minded and to be agile, and not to be afraid of experimenting, not to get ourselves paralyzed. Like there's this thing, analysis paralysis. So instead of like start overthinking, okay, we need to go to the US, what do we need to do? I need to read a few books on how to scale to the US. We actually learned by doing it. And we already had experience with scaling to Berlin.
Okay.
And we also had experience to like a small scale into London. And we just transferred what we learned there. And we kind of did it a little bit like in the not going by the book. I mean, we just started very small, experimenting. So we first started hiring a couple of colleagues in the Silicon Valley, of course, because this is what everybody does. You have to be in San Francisco. You have to be in the Valley. Okay, we're going to go there. So we went there. Things worked out in the beginning, but then they started to move less slower. So then we hired a couple of great teammates in Denver, and decided, well, actually Denver makes a much more sensible decision for us to be there. Let's try and see what will happen there.
Why Denver, by the way?
It's because the third and the fourth US employee that we hired were based in Denver.
Okay.
And as a small company, you're, in most of the cases, of course, when you're scaling to a new market, and in the technology sector, it's very easy to be remote first, right? So we started we hired a few people there, just by chance, I would say. And then it turned out great. So we just doubled down on it.
By the way, I just wondered, is there like cultural differences of how people implement the OKRs? I mean, I can imagine that, for instance, Germany would be very open-minded about it, but maybe this is just a prejudice.
Oh, there's
Can you
definitely
observe?
differences.
Yeah. Okay.
But then again, it's all comes down to the what do we want to achieve? What is the outcome that we want to influence? So once you start thinking about this, it removes this like geographical and cultural barriers.
Do you have like like practical stories that you can share?
Well,
with
there's
your
like
customers?
very uninteresting things. For example, like to just give you an example of Germany, because the German trade not trade law but labor law
Okay.
is very protective of
Yes.
individuals' privacy and data. When you go into implement objectives and key results into very large organizations, so there's a certain threshold that you start implementing it, and there is those things that are called the workers' union,
Yes.
workers' council. It's not a union; it's a workers'
council,
council,
yes.
like an internal union.
Yes.
Whose goal is to protect the rights of the employees,
Yeah.
and in terms of policies and how the company operates, and because there's so many regulations on how performance data should be shared, how similar things work. It's you have to a little bit go against the flow.
The rules.
Yeah, and well, we have to work with a lot of those organizations to make sure, first of all, that we are within the regulation,
Okay.
but also they understand that this is not meant for them to be like evaluated in terms of performance and monetary compensation, but it's actually to help them achieve success. And once you start having this conversation and start thinking about how data is going to be presented within this organization, you can achieve, you can make progress on implementation of OKRs there.
And I never really thought about it. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time in Austria, and I know about the councils that, which were actually the nightmare of many managers, I think. It's the same in Germany, but I never thought of this aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, well, with most of our large German customers, we have to always go to the workers' council to be evaluated and to make sure that they have no concerns about what is going to go on in Gtmhub.
Another shift that you did over time is, I don't know, at first focusing on the SMEs and, I don't know, maybe even startups, and then you shifted to the larger organizations, to corporations. I still wonder, why did you do that? Are OKRs a good idea for a startup, for instance?
They're a good idea for any type of organization, period. That was always the plan, and this is probably something that we took from the textbook, from how we scaled the product in Telerik that we were working on. So the product that we were working on was initially aimed into small to medium businesses that wanted to have a web presence. We were building a content management system. So it started like capturing the SMB market, and then naturally, as it grew, we moved into the enterprise world. With Gtmhub, when we started, we always knew that the end game is to capture the whole spectrum of companies. And to be able to do this, we knew a couple of things. So, for example, that for an early stage company, it is almost impossible to chase enterprise deal life cycle in terms of sales. So to give you an example, now when you get a very large contract, this contract probably can be worked on for well over 6 months. And that for for a starting company is either life or death. I mean, you cannot afford a 6 months life cycle of each deal. So our strategy has always been to first, implement a product that is enterprise ready, whatever that means, because everyone can have a different understanding of this. We had our own understanding of what we need to do in order to capture the enterprise. But also, we decided that we're going to start by focusing our messaging and go-to-market initially to the SMBs, because with them, it's way easier. First of all, they get to the aha moment of deciding where to go with you much quicker. So you can have like a 15 to 20 days life cycle of someone starting with a trial to then deciding that they want to put their credit card in and to onboard their team. And then this also helped us to get traction, which is important when you want to scale the company further, when you want to go to talking to potential investors. So that was the plan all along.
Well, you obviously did also pretty good when it comes to traction, because your investors were impressed. I think at some point I had the chance to talk to Christian Reed, I think, from CRV.
Yep.
And he was totally, impressed by the pace that you're developing, by how are you doing stuff. What did you learn from this journey so far when it comes to investors? So you got some angel investment, you got also supported by LaunchUp and 11, and now, I mean, we're talking Series C and 120 million, something that we seldomly see here in the region, if not, almost never. Only recently with Payhawk and maybe some other companies from Romania. We had the unicorn now in Greece. Is the development of the whole region helping you? Or what did you learn over this time when you were fundraising?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to talk about when it comes to talk about fundraising, but my personal experience is that you have to know very well at what stage of your life cycle you are, so that you optimize for the next step. Okay. And then again, it's a step-by-step approach. You know what's your end goal, but you know also that in order to get there, you must get past certain milestones. Okay. And once you start thinking, okay, what do we need for this? How do we get there? But again, it's not a good idea to chase, for example, to say we need to be Series C or Series A company or whatever. You can say it's always about, with us has been about survival. So what do we need to get to the next step of making sure that the company survives another day, another month, another 6 months, another year, and now scaling it to sustainability.
So it's not a good idea to have OKRs for fundraising? Or because
I wouldn't say that.
I
wouldn't say that specifically, because we do OKRs about fundraising.
Oh, you do?
Our CEO does, but again, it's not about saying getting this valuation or this, but actually figuring out what do we need in order for us to Gtmhub to get into the next level, to scale further, to keep on running. Because in the beginning, you probably can survive for a couple of days, right? When you're a very small company. Then over time, you start thinking about how about surviving for another 6 months? Okay. How about surviving for another 1 year? And then when you start putting things into perspective.
And at this stage, you think about surviving for a how long period?
Now it's a matter of scale and becoming more efficient and optimizing our process. That we know that certain things work, so how do we double down on them, make them more efficient, but also we know that as things move along, as I said, things that worked previously in a previous setting, in a previous, we have this thing that we're a completely different company than what we were last year. So you always have to be thinking about where you're going next.
Yes. There's been a lot of, rumors probably that you might be the next unicorn Bulgaria will have. What do you think about this metric, $1 billion?
That's a very distracting metric. And this is why we don't want to focus on this. We actually want to focus on how do we make our customers successful? How do we make sure that our customers execute on their strategy and they achieve success? That's the most important thing for us. And this is how we're always thinking.
I would totally agree with you that in a way it's a vanity metric. At the same time, there are also the other opinions that such metrics, they do matter when it comes to the perception of the potential of Bulgaria as an innovation hub, as also the whole region, Southeast Europe, that it only actually matters only in the eyes of how we're perceived by.
Exactly, but you can always measure those things by proxy, for example.
Okay.
Let's take an example like the global reach of Bulgarian startups. We have customers probably in 100 and something countries in the world. We have colleagues and team members in more than 10 different countries now. So I think for me this is an interesting observation, right?
Yes.
And then you talk about the other companies in the ecosystem in Bulgaria again. What is the reach? Are they a player on the Bulgarian market? Are they a player on the European market? Do they have a global reach? And for me, this is the more important things. Like, what are we achieving with those? What are the problems that we're solving for? It's not the valuations that we're getting. Yeah, eventually we'll get those valuations. Someone will, right? And we already saw someone getting this valuation. Yes. So this is not the measurement for success. It's a vanity metric. The measurement of success is actually what are you able to somehow solve for a problem that you set out yourself to solve for.
I have an interesting idea of, maybe defining the OKRs for us as an ecosystem. That would be interesting. I would love, to sit with you at some point and maybe think about it, because then we would probably have a better grasp of how well we're doing.
I think we're doing very, very well. I had recent talks with other ecosystem leaders, and there's hundreds of new companies, and so this is the important. You can see people that actually now are thinking, okay, I have this great idea, but instead of like working for someone, right? Why don't I try my luck and see how far I can get? So people are also starting to be more willing to take a risk, because it's a big risk taking this. And when we know that 95% of companies that startups fail in their first couple of years, it's a big risk to take, and it takes a lot of courage to do so.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder, do you use this mindset also in your personal life? Do you have some kind of goal setting framework?
No, actually, I don't take OKRs into my personal life.
I know that you're very keen on sports, where it's also about progressing and knowing also how fast you're progressing. Otherwise, why would people do sports? I don't know. I was just wondering. Tell me about it.
Well, probably in personal life and in hobbies, I don't have this actually. I try to take it more easy. I would say not so focused on the end result, but actually enjoy the stuff that I'm doing. And well, obviously you can, if you want to, if you're a more organized person, probably would want to get some sort of goal setting framework even in personal life or into sports or whatever. But I focus this in my professional life. Yeah.
I totally respect that. I tend to be a bit more conscientious when it comes to professional life, and then at work, I really enjoy exactly those days when I don't have an agenda, I don't have a schedule, I don't have meetings planned, and I can just, flow. How do you flow in your free time, in your spare time?
I like taking a afternoon nap in a Sunday or Saturday just to recharge and just take the time with the family, because it is very hard to both work a full-time job and also have things running. So you need to make a very conscious effort to be present, right?
I was trying to lead you to this final question that we have, which is about the ultimate goals after all. But I find it really hard, for someone who prefers a bit, more to flow and to enjoy life and the path and not the goal. And still, I'm going to ask you this one from today's perspective. If you have to put yourself somehow in the future and think about what we are today from a different perspective. I think this is part of change management often. Yeah. What do you want to be remembered for? Looking, from that perspective.
Oh, that's a hard question.
It is.
Never given it any thought. Well, let's see. Well, so when I started my career, I wanted to be a software architect. Well, I went into all the levels of developing software in my previous organization. So I kind of said to me, I accomplished that. What's the next challenge? And so it turned out that the next challenge is becoming entrepreneur or being part of a startup. I never considered myself as I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I just go with the flow and see where it takes me. So it's very hard to say what I want to be remembered with. I think this is also a very vain thing to be doing, to be thinking about your legacy all the time, or what do you want to be remembered for. So I would say, well, there's still plenty of time for things to happen. So you can never know.
And what is the impact that you want Gtmhub to have on, I don't know, let's say the local business community here?
Well, for me personally, the impact is to have more people focus on chasing their dreams, and if they want to be an entrepreneur, be an entrepreneur. If they learn something by being part of Gtmhub on how to be successful, that would be great, right? So to give opportunity for people to grow and to excel themselves in whatever field they want to do.
The ultimate freedom. Rado, thank you very much for this conversation, for being here with us. There were some very interesting, thoughts that I would like to explore with you, maybe in a different setting, because I think I care about a lot about the impact that we have as an ecosystem, and maybe there is an interesting, framework that we can explore. In any case, this is your first visit. I hope, and I'm actually looking forward to, hearing a bit more about Gtmhub quite soon. Let's see. I guess there will be news, and I'm sure that
there are always news. There's always something happening in Gtmhub.
Yes, and I'm sure that we will have the chance to have another conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure being your guest.
Thank you, Rado.
In the next episode of the Recursive podcast, we welcome Darin Majarov, the founder of the EdTech platforms for video lessons, Uče and EduBoom.
And then we saw that, in Bulgaria, as I described it, it was not the most successful thing, but in other countries it was disaster. For example, in some countries, they didn't have online education as a substitute. They had vacations because simply they couldn't adapt. This was the second year, not the first one. So Bulgaria turned out to be one of the leaders with this online education in Europe, and I could say that we are in top 3, top 5 of Europe. I see this because a lot of countries, they didn't have almost anything, and very often we received emails from outside, people who are asking for advice from us. From other countries, they are trying to copy some things from Bulgaria. This is not something that we're used to, but that's what it happened.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.